Good afternoon, and welcome to the City Club. My name is Jim Foster, and I'm Executive Director of the City Club. I'm delighted to moderate this debate between candidates for the Republican nomination for United States Senate from Ohio. The winner of this race will face off against the incumbent and Democratic nominee, Sherrod Brown, who is completing his first term in the Senate. The City Club invited all the candidates in this race to this debate, and we are delighted that participating today will be Russell Bliss, a resident of Willoughby, who is an airline captain and check pilot, David Dodt, who is a retired General Motors United Auto Workers journeyman and U.S. Navy veteran, Donna Glisman of Greytown, who has been a small business owner in the motel and restaurant business, LaMont Gregory of Beaver Creek, a self-employed medical research consultant and U.S. Executive Department consultant, and Michael Pryce, a resident of Hudson, who is an orthopedic surgeon. The rules for the opening portion of this debate are: each candidate has 2 minutes for an opening statement. After these opening remarks, we will have a panel of City Club members who will ask questions of the candidates. We are pleased to welcome our audience with us here today, and those listening to WCPN 90.3 Idea Stream, as well as those watching the evening televised broadcast on WVIZ. We know some of you in the audience support one or the other of these candidates, and we appreciate your maintaining the decorum of the City Club by listening respectfully to all responses. The order of presentation was determined by a drawing a few minutes ago. Mr. Bliss will present first.
Thank you very much. Now, I am the GOP write-in candidate for the United States Senate. However, I believe in people representation more so than just party representation. We need to involve the people more, the citizens more, the way that Ray Bliss did back in 1965 when he rebuilt the Republican Party after the Goldwater loss. Now, we live in a country where the best in someone has always been brought out through hard work and individual responsibility. We've got a God-given right to build the greatest lives that we can for our families and ourselves, and it's not any government's, domestic or foreign, to impose any limit. It's not their right to impose any limit on us beyond our Constitution. Yet our freedoms are being encroached upon more and more every day, which is why I chose almost 2 years ago to get involved in this. I want my children and future generations to have the same opportunities that I had growing up, and those are being eroded away. We need to get back to the Constitution. I think that's first and foremost. We need to stop with overspending in D.C. We need to have a smaller and more accountable government that focuses on our national defense and protects our freedoms without impeding our liberty. Government needs to get out of the way of our job creators and let the free market thrive. So with a renewed zest for America, something I feel that's been missing for a long time. Protect our borders. Enhance education to reinvigorate the inventor. Who's going to be the next Steve Jobs, the next Wright brothers? We need to get back to that. Repeal Obamacare. A simpler tax code is another one. Sanctity of life. I firmly believe that human life, all human life, needs to be protected from the moment of conception until natural death. And there's no discussion with me beyond that. But the majority of the struggles we face in this country right now can be traced to one ominous source, and it resides on the East River in New York City, and that's the United Nations. We have to stand up to this threat our sovereignty faces, and we've been under attack by a series of acronym organizations, the EPA, the FDA, the ATF, the IRS. So we need to do what we can to maintain our sovereignty, and I'm ready to stand up and fight for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bliss. Now we will have opening remarks from Mr. Dodt.
Good afternoon. I'm a retired UAW GM journeyman. I'm also a Navy veteran. I got into this fight, and that's what it is. It's a fight. This election is as important as the election in 1860, freedom or slavery. And the Democratic Party, the party of slavery in 1860, is trying to use economic slavery instead of change this time, but it's still slavery. I'm concerned about that because I'm concerned about whether my children or my grandchildren or my great-grandchildren will live and have the same freedoms that I have. I've been a political operative for the Republican Party since going back to 1975. 76, 80, and 84, I was chairman for Reagan in my county. And I went to the Republican convention, and I was asked by the chairman of the Ohio delegation to defend the labor plank of the Republican Party, which I did. I was also labor liaison for the Ohio Republican Party under 2 state chairmen, and also served as elected to the Central Committee and served at precinct levels. And I worked on all other kinds of other people's campaigns. But this time I looked around and I was hoping for somebody a year ago to stand up and take on the fight. And I didn't see anybody doing it. I called the state chairman. I couldn't get an answer from the people in Columbus. I called them in February, March, and April. I said, the heck with it. I'll do it. I went and got the petitions, and like the rest of us up here at this table, we all ran all over this state getting signatures so that we could get on the ballot. So when it comes to who I respect on this that are here, I respect everybody here because we all did the same thing. Now we're going to have various disagreements on different options that we think are valid, but other than that, no. I really appreciate their participation. It makes you a better candidate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dodt. We will now have opening remarks from Mr. Gregory.
Thank you, sir. My name is LaMont Gregory, and I'm seeking to be your next United States Senator, to stand before you and Almighty God and solemnly swear to support, defend, and bear full allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and to faithfully discharge the duties of a United States Senator. This great nation began with the following words: "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Amongst these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." The pursuit of happiness was enshrined into our very beginning because those scholarly founders of this great nation were also Greek scholars. And in ancient Greece, happiness was defined as the full use of one's powers along lines of excellence. They understood the necessity of having an occupation and that we garner so much of our self-worth from the work that we do. William McKinley: "It is the interest of the working man with which this nation must be concerned. When we work, we save. When we save, we invest. When we work, save, and invest, America prospers. And we must get back to that prosperous America." McKinley also said, "Capital can take care of itself." And what do we do when we get in trouble? We bail out private capital and we bail on the American worker. This can no longer be the case. We must re-strengthen families in this country to reawaken those values of hard work, creativity, and cooperation that have served this nation so well. And if Providence will guide me, I will represent you and do just that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory. We will now have opening remarks from Ms. Glisman.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad that you took your time to come here. Of course, I'm Donna Glisman. I am coined myself the red, white, and blue collar candidate. And I am the second female in 18 years to be on the Republican primary ballot. I was born in Detroit, Michigan, and I come from a long line of police officers and factory workers. My father was a lieutenant for the Detroit police officers, and both of his brothers, my uncles, were sergeant detectives on narcotics. I've been a business owner. I have worked for Fortune 500 companies in management, retail sales, as well as manufacturer's rep, and I also was in the trenches of the Warren stamping plant in Detroit, right on the assembly line for 4 years. I've been an elected public official not only in Michigan but also in Ohio. I helped campaign for certain individuals such as George Romney, the father of Mitt. He became the governor for two terms. Also for Bush, Nixon, and I believe in helping the community. I've done a lot of volunteer work. I believe in family. I have 3 children, 2 daughters, a son, 5 living grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. I was baptized Baptist, confirmed Lutheran, and I even went to school at night to learn about Judaism. The framers of our country back wanted Congress to be made up of the people, by the people, and for the people. I am just that, the person that you would like to see there. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Glisman. And now we will have opening remarks from Mr. Pryce.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Michael Pryce, and I am a candidate for the U.S. Senate. I consider this to be probably the greatest honor of my life to be able to speak before this group. I've been from Northeast Ohio my entire life, and this has been a big part of my life watching the City Club debates, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. There are two kinds of people who run for public office. There are people that want to be someone and people that need to do something. As you can see from my biography, that I've had a busy life. I've had a wide range of experience, multiple contacts with federal government. I'm a practicing physician when healthcare is a big part of this election. I'm a small business owner, and I've been to 2 presidential medical roundtables appointed by 2 U.S. presidents. So I really don't need to be someone. I think that in my lifetime I've done very well for myself, and yet I'm troubled. So I thought I would tell you something about one thing that seeks my passion. And we sometimes forget that government is all about people and life, and not a political party. As a doctor, I've seen life from the beginning, from the end, and all through the middle. I've lived the problems of my state, my country, through my patients, and when I drive into cities and see the biggest employer is a hospital or a school, I know my country's in trouble. We now have a law in place that seeks to intimidate and force doctors to withhold medication, treatments, fluid, and nutrition, over-medication, and commit abortion against their will. Financial penalties against physicians have now risen from $25,000 a year to $1.5 million per year to intimidate these doctors to do what they want. The government has hijacked all of your medical records by attaching their right to do so, tying it to the law that's supposed to protect you against that. There can be no greater crime against the people of a country than to demote the sanctity of life and intimidate doctors into prematurely ending lives based on a cost-benefit analysis. As my ancestors did 236 years ago, I pledge to you my life and my sacred honor to restore this country to its former place in the world. We don't need a fundamental change in America. We need a fundamental change in the people that we send to Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Pryce. And again, thank you to all the candidates. Now we will have questions from a panel of City Club members. The City Club has a long tradition of actively participating in the election process by hosting these debates. These gentlemen have seen many of the debates over the years, and they are very familiar with the issues that are central to this election. Today's panel consists of longtime City Club members Don Cairns, Rick Taft, and Bill Walsh. Their questions will be asked to all candidates, and each will have 1 minute to respond. As moderator, I reserve the right to ask follow-up questions with a 30-second response. We will open this session with 2 questions from each of the panelists and then have the opportunity for participation by the audience. And if need be, we will return to additional questions from the panel later on. So will you have our first questions from Mr. Cairns, is it? Don?
Is this on? No. Thank you. If you support repeal of what's been called Obamacare, what would you replace it with?
Let's go down the table from left to right with Mr. Bliss answering first.
Well, I'm a firm believer in HSAs, health savings accounts. Put the individual responsibility back on the taxpayer and the person to maintain their own health insurance. Another thing is to eliminate the middleman. That's where we're seeing a lot of the bloating of the costs. So we take the middleman out of the way, and I'm in favor of more of the direct pay between the doctor and the patient, and the doctor or the patient and the hospital and the medical facility. But then again, with the health savings account, you can bank your money and use it the way you want to or the way you choose to for whatever health concerns you have down the road. But nothing should ever be mandated on you.
Mr. Dodt?
Okay. The concept of tort reform, yes. Buying insurance across state lines, yes. I think the governor of every state should empower a panel to evaluate the insurance companies that want to participate in that state. And when they do that evaluation, it should be based on the income level of the citizens involved. Once that's all the state does is recommend, and after that, it's up to the people to take the initiative. If the state and the legislature, the governor and the legislature, decide to subsidize the less fortunate in that society, in that state, they should have that ability to do so. But that is not mandatory, and it takes the federal government completely out of the picture.
All righty. Ms. Glisman.
Okay, I'm opposed to the Obama administration because they have steamrolled us, our Constitution, with its mandated health care. I believe that should be up to each individual or their companies that they work for. I also feel that we need better education to instruct our people, no matter what their plateau in life is. Eating properly, better diet, exercise, preventative care, and we can significantly reduce cases of heart disease, high blood pressure, and other ailments that ultimately bombard our health care facilities and drive up the cost. So, do I think we should have Obamacare? Absolutely not. That's a dictatorship, in my opinion.
Thank you, Ms. Glisman. And Mr. Gregory.
Okay, thank you for the question. And as I see it, there are two parts to it. There's the issue of the mandate. There's the issue of what we need to do with our health care system to reform it. The problem with our health care system is that there are no provisions for catastrophic illness. And we are being bankrupted by long-term care for the elderly and providing for those who have no insurance. They go to the emergency room now, and we spend the highest cost to get the least amount of care. The Supreme Court now will take up this issue of the mandate. They would look into the minds of the framers, and they'll have to look at the fact that one of the first things that our first Congress did that had more framers in it than at any other time was to mandate that every citizen have a musket and a charge within their home. They will have to decide whether that's a narrow or a wide ruling, whether they knew that we couldn't get together another Revolutionary Army, or whether they thought sometime in the future government might have to mandate.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory. Dr. Pryce.
Well, I'm the only candidate anywhere in the country that's written a book about health care. And I brought it with me, advertising will be there. It's called Anathema, America's War on Medicine. And this book has taken me to national prominence as a health care reformer. I'm the only candidate here that has an actual plan. And the plan consists of 3 steps. It's an electronic medical record that the government won't have their hands on, just physicians and patients. And number 2, I have the only plan that has managed liability. I completely reformed liability without taking away a patient's right to sue. So we don't interfere with any constitutional rights at all. Now, this plan has been touted by many people in national television. I've been there several times. And it's been touted as the Bible for healthcare reform by some radio talk show hosts. And they keep bringing it back up on Fox News. I believe this is the plan that can replace Obamacare once we repeal it.
Thank you, Dr. Pryce. And I think now the second question is going to come from Mr. Welsh. Bill?
First, thank you to the candidates for appearing with us today. This question is about the economy. What do you believe Washington can do to help our economy, the U.S. economy, thrive? And what do you expect, if elected, you will do to promote Ohio's economy?
Thanks, Bill. And let's do the reverse order, Dr. Pryce, and then back up the table.
Thank you. I think there's one thing that can do it with one fell swoop. I'm a surgeon and I'm used to doing things in a definitive fashion. I think that the consumption tax will solve all of our problems. Number 1, it will stop the fighting between Democrats and Republicans. It will raise revenue and it will cut taxes. And we get rid of all the business taxes, all the income taxes, and the cost of our goods will be affordable. That will start people buying goods. That will generate the free market in this country. It will also generate the market overseas that we don't have presently. And so once we get that under control and we start bringing the cost of these goods down, it starts raising the value of the dollar. That's the way you solve Ohio's problems. Ohio's not going to help itself unless they get rid of this terrible workman's compensation law and bring down the high cost of these health care premiums that are driving businesses out of our state. And once we get a valuable dollar back to the state, that's going to solve all of Ohio's problems as well.
Thank you, Dr. Pryce. Mr. Gregory.
Okay, thank you very much. What Washington can do is reduce regulation on those who want to get into business. The FAA is the model, the Federal Aviation thing. If you want to build an experimental aircraft, the FAA will come to you and say, I would like to offer you all the help that we can. You can tell them no. You can build that aircraft, and when you get ready to try to fly it, they'll come back to you saying, here's a wealth of information we have. You can say no and try that aircraft. Regulation should be a service from our federal government. For every $1 billion that we import over what we export, we lose 13,000 jobs. We're $700 billion in deficit. We're 9,100,000 jobs. What can I do here in the state of Ohio? I can help those innovators who really create jobs, those small to medium-sized businesses, to innovate their projects and manufacture them here. The problem is not that we're not inventive. The problem is we're not manufacturing what we invent, and we get back into the business of exporting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory. Ms. Glisman.
Well, we need to balance the trade deficit and impose tariffs and sanctions on those nations who do not cooperate in balanced trade policies. Our free market system cannot work when third-party nations are mixed in and undermine our standard of living. Reassess change and make changes in the federal regulations so that we are not hindered, our businesses aren't hindered. And what's even worse is that we're sending more goodies over to the foreign countries than what is coming over here, keeping our small businesses at a standstill. Reward responsible corporations who create careers for Americans and invest in our nation with tax benefits while punishing those through taxation who kill jobs and are sending them overseas, and still there are companies that never get to open up their doors.
Thank you, Ms. Glisman. Mr. Dodt.
We have to simplify the tax plan. I think that's the one thing. I'm for the flat tax. If we go to that, what they call the fair tax, it should not exceed 3% because that would be harmful to the least fortunate in our society, and I don't think we should punish them in that way. Right now, the government punishes people for working and saving, and I want to reward people. I suggest that in order to rebuild the middle class, that any worker, hourly worker, I don't care if he's a union or non-union shop, be taxed only on 40 hours for the next 5 years. All overtime goes in the bank. And that would create the capital that we need to rebuild our middle class. We also have a problem with banking in the fact that we're overcapitalizing our small banks. Small banks make the major loans to the small business community. And because of that, because the Congress wanted to punish the big banks because they were undercapitalized, they made a broad stroke thing and made everybody be overcapitalized. That's a mistake. Punish the people that screwed up. Leave the other people that did right, leave them alone.
Thank you, Mr. Dodt and Mr. Bliss.
We need to release the stranglehold of all the overbearing regulations that are affecting business, big business and small business. You can give small businesses all the tax breaks you want, but as we've seen, my father runs a machine shop. If the big companies that we do contract work for are being impeded by regulations and they don't have the work, you can give the little guy all the breaks they want. They're not going to have the work anyway. So the trickle-down works kind of in the wrong way, that direction. With Ohio, the industry that built Ohio, and this plays right into my wheelhouse, is aerospace. It's the number one export for this state. It is the number one export for the country. We need to get back to rebuilding our aerospace program instead of castrating it like this administration has. And that's going to put thousands of people back to work in Ohio. Not just NASA Glenn and the people out at Plum Brook, but you've got a General Electric Aviation down in Wilmington, or down in Evendale, who's in the process of re-engineering all the Boeing 737 airplanes. And I've been in contact with GE and Wilmington Airport, who, as you know, when Airborne left, crippled that area and 6,000 people lost their jobs. So if we can get them to come together, that's a boost to Southwest Ohio right away. But bring back that industry, you'll bring back jobs to Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. Bliss. Mr. Taft, I think you have a question.
Most of us get our initial exposure to politics through domestic issues, but at the level of the Senate, you are asked to take positions on and act on issues of international import, right up to and including the declaration of war if we have something terrible that happens. How have you, in your life before this candidacy, or perhaps during the candidacy, sought to build your expertise on international issues?
Thank you, Rick, and we'll change the order up here a little bit and let Ms. Glisman go first, followed by Mr. Gregory and Dr. Pryce, and then Mr. Dodt and Mr. Bliss, and I'll keep you on track.
Okay. Well, since 1981, where I moved to Put-in-Bay, Ohio, I've been in the tourist industry, at which I owned a motel and a restaurant. During that time period, I've met people from all over the world, not just Ohio and the 40 other 9 states. I feel that we do a lot of importing from other countries, and we also bring in a lot of foreign exchange students. And I have to tell you that I think they're taking the jobs away from American kids who would like to go to college and can't afford it. I think that needs to either be cut in half, and I don't care where you go here in the state of Ohio, where there's a tourist industry, you're going to find a foreign exchange student from Russia, from Thailand, from Africa this year over at Put-in-Bay. Every country that they need help, well, so do our Americans. And I don't know if that completely answers your question, but I have been opposed to that situation. Charity begins here at home. Let's take care of our American kids and our people who are out of work.
Thank you, Ms. Glisman. Mr. Gregory.
Yes, thank you. The role of the United States Senate in foreign affairs comes down to making those declarations of war. They've largely been taken away by various executives by entering into executive agreements. The treaty power has been taken away because executives have entered into accords. I spent 25 years overseas and worked for every administration from the Reagan administration through G.W. Bush. Started with the Land for Peace deal between Israel and Egypt, and I still believe the issue in the Middle East is my best one, through Afghanistan, including Bosnia, Rwanda, the Sudan, the death squad issues in Guatemala and El Salvador. I've had a wealth of international experience, and I will bring that to the United States Senate. Issues of war and peace, I've dealt with them, including ending the war in Angola after 9/11, and spent time with Karzai in the presidential palace in Kabul for several months discussing how we should go about handling that problem. And unfortunately, we decided to pull out of Afghanistan early, go into Iraq, only to return and start the war all over again.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gregory. Dr. Pryce.
Obviously, the thing that has affected me most about foreign policy has been my experience in the military. I was just a young boy when I went to the military, but I grew up real quickly as I went overseas. I was involved in naval intelligence, and I learned an awful lot about what our government does across the world, and I've gained a lot of opinions based on that. I also have not been politically quiet. I've served on Republican committees, and I've been through government committees and been involved with various government agencies, and I know how policy is set. I know what the Senate's responsibility is, and I'm not afraid to take that responsibility. But I've also had an opportunity to interact with several Muslim doctors on my staff, and I've gotten to know a little bit more about the Muslim world than I did before. And I think I'm a good candidate, and I think I'll act responsibly with foreign policy.
Thank you, Dr. Pryce. Mr. Dodt.
The Middle East disaster started with President Carter when he cut the legs off from under the Shah of Iran and installed a bunch of turban-headed crazies who now want to throw nuclear weapons around. As far as I'm concerned, Mr. Carter, the Shah is looking better and better every day. Now President Obama has cut the legs out of 2 other Middle Eastern leaders, Gaddafi and Mubarak in Egypt. Gaddafi had already given up all his chemical weapons, all the kind of the nasty stuff that he could think of, so he was not a problem. Mubarak was holding the line against the Muslim Brotherhood because they wanted to go to war and kill the people in Israel. So both men were bad people. I'm not saying they're nice guys at all, but they were doing the good thing at the time. So you got to take that into consideration when you start going. going around. Right now, the president wants to sell M1 Abrams tanks to Egypt. They could only be one use for them against Israel. No, I will not support that.
Thank you, Mr. Dodt. Mr. Bliss.
My career, my job in aviation throughout my career has taken me outside of the country, and I've had a good exposure to international cultures and the way that things happen around the world. But so many times lately, the United States is caught footing the bill for a majority of international events, which I don't think they need to be held accountable or not held responsible for as far as the payroll for it. When it comes to trade, military, or humanitarian, we need to draw a hard line and stand on it and not be tools of the UN or NATO, which is what's happening in Afghanistan right now. We're not blind to that. And we need to find ways to get the right people in there with the attitude that won't play the game, and they'll say, we can't do this. We got to worry about what's going on here first. If someone needs help across the world, we'll go ahead and help them out, but I think they need to ask first. We can't foot the bill for everybody's problems anymore. And I look forward to the duty, not just the office, but the duty that comes with the office and those obligations.
Thank you, Mr. Bliss. And now we'll return again to Don Cairns for another question.
This question is in the foreign policy area and deals with the tensions in the area as a result of Iranians' nuclear activity. So I'd like each of you to comment on your views of the sanctions which the U.S. and the UN has imposed on Iran. And secondly, what do you think the stance of the United States should be in respect to Israel and their threat to attack Iran's nuclear facilities?
Thank you, Don. We'll have this order: Mr. Gregory, Dr. Pryce, Mr. Dodt, and Ms. Glisman, and Mr. Bliss, and I'll again keep you in order. Thanks. Mr. Gregory.
Yep. I was overseas in 1998, and the day that our Senate voted to impeach Clinton, the Iranians took 250,000 soldiers and invaded Afghanistan and pushed the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and those foreign fighters back halfway across the country. And they've not paid us very much attention to this. This was a major invasion. We have played since 1953, when we went into the British to settle the oil crisis. We have played the paternal partner in that area of the world. We have not done very well. We've been involved in regime change. We're in it now. We were in it in Algeria. We were in it in Libya. We were in it in Egypt. We've got to have a rational policy. Where it comes to Israel, Israel is a sovereign nation and will decide its own foreign policy and deal with its own threats. The Sinai Accords commit us to assist them in that effort, but Israel will make its own decision as to what it should do about this.
Gregory. Dr. Pryce.
When I was in high school, I learned about a policy a long time ago that said, speak softly and carry a real big stick. And that affected me throughout my life, and that we've gotten away from the fact that we've lost respect in the world. And people do things to us because they think that we're not going to answer. And like I said, my military background has helped me a lot, and intelligence has actually helped me a lot too. Iran is a very dangerous country right now. And I'll be honest with you right now, I don't care what they say. I think they already have a bomb. I think they already have a way to initiate it. And we have to be there, ready to act, to defend Israel by whatever means it takes to stop that. They're crazy people over there, and they have no concern for life. But I think we have to be the world's policeman in this issue and not give away any more of our weapons that we need to enforce whatever we need to do.
Thank you, Dr. Pryce. Mr. Dodt.
Israel's a sovereign nation. It's going to do what it does in its own self-interest. Their very survival, it's a very small country, so their very survival is at stake. So we can pontificate till your eyes fall out, and they lose their lives. That's wrong. We have to support them. Now, sanctions, I don't know if these sanctions really work at all. I'm seriously about that. We've had sanctions against Cuba. What the heck good has it done us? We've had sanctions against all manner of states, and the people still continued. Iraq was a good one. We had sanctions on them forever. It doesn't do any good. They only understand one thing. You're going to put a knife at their throat and cut it from one end to the other. That's what they understand. That's it. They don't grasp peace. They don't have a concept of love, of humanity. And I'm sorry that their lives are like that, but that's the way it is. You have to face it with reality. So I support Israel.
Thank you, Mr. Dodt. Ms. Glisman.
Okay. I support Israel as well. I can remember on the day of 9/11, and I was in Detroit at the time, and I'm in a laundromat, and up on the screen I see a plane hitting a building, and then another plane. And I knew my mother, who was in her 80s, would be very concerned, so I wrapped up and went back to her house to make sure she was okay. Within an hour, there was a rap at the door, and it was a person who worked for Anderson Windows. And he was early and scared to death. He said, I was in Dearborn, where they are shooting guns, shooting firecrackers, and burning our flag. I had to leave for my own life. And this was a black man and a very nice gentleman. I feel we cannot cut back on any of our national defense. I think we need to strengthen our borders. We need to protect us first. And if a country over there needs our help, fine. But I'm tired of giving ammunition to people that are going to turn around and shoot us.
Thank you, Ms. Glisman. And Mr. Bliss.
On the focus of Iran, I think we need even tougher sanctions. But as Mr. Dodt said before, that the sanctions don't always work, and the Iraq issue was a perfect example of that. So I would not be opposed to. I'm not recommending or saying we should have a front-page media broadcast assault on this country, but I'm not opposed to anything that's done under cover of darkness. As far as Israel goes, and the Sinai Accord notwithstanding, Israel will always have and must always have the right to defend herself. And not because of any accord, but because the country's been a faithful ally, we need to stand ready as their brother to defend that country should they be attacked. And they're going to do what they need to do to defend themselves. They have that right.
Thank you, Mr. Bliss. And we'll have one more question from the panel. We'll see how the time goes. Mr. Welsh and Kerry, make it 30 seconds, I think, for this.
Which Republican candidate for president do you support and why?
And we'll go in this order: Mr. Dodt, Ms. Glisman, Mr. Bliss, Dr. Pryce, and Mr. Gregory. I'll keep you in order. Mr. Dodt.
The one I can't stand is, I'm sorry, is my personal opinion is Mr. Romney. He's probably a nice guy, but he's what I call a rhino, Republican in name only. I can live with Mr. Santorum with no problem, and I can respect Mr. Gingrich. My dad had some advice years ago when I was a kid. He says, always hang out with smart people. You can't learn a damn thing from somebody that's stupid. And he said, and Newt Gingrich is smart, and so is Santorum.
Thank you, Mr. Dodt. Ms. Glisman.
Well, as I mentioned before, I helped support George Romney in Michigan, and I knew of Mitt when he was just a younger person. And if he's anything like his father, and I believe him to be so, he would be a very good leader. I have not completely made up my mind as to who I would endorse, but that probably is at this point in time, it would be Mr. Romney.
Thank you, Ms. Glisman. Mr. Bliss.
Can I take Ron Paul and Rick Santorum and put them in a blender and accept whatever comes out? Because that would be the perfect combination. The Ron Paul side, I love the guy because he's true to our Constitution, and he's the only candidate running right now that is. Foreign policy, I might have an issue with, but the way he defends it, he's dead on the way the Constitution has it spelled out. Now, if we're looking for a more Reagan-esque quality, that would be the Rick Santorum. So, since I'm running for office, I'm not going to give you a definitive answer.
Dr. Pryce.
Well, I, like Rusty, happen to like Ron Paul. My problem is that the way the media has treated him and the way they've pushed him into a corner, that I don't think that we're going to ever be able to see that love of the Constitution come forward as a presidential candidate. So what I'm praying for every night when I go to sleep is a brokered convention, so we can see what these people are really about and what they're really all, and there's going to be somebody out there that'll step forward. It may be one of those four, but right now I'm not ready to commit on any one of them right now.
Thank you, Dr. Pryce. Mr. Gregory.
On his values for family and what they would do about reawakening the values of hard work, creativity, and cooperation, Santorum by far. For his understanding of what we need to do about issues like the Federal Reserve, it would definitely be Ron Paul. But what I fear, just like our missing state treasurer here, there are going to be such weak challengers that the Democrats will find it very easy to maintain the White House. We can't let this happen.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory. Thank you, candidates. Let's take a break here for a couple of minutes for City Club announcements. The City Club of Cleveland is the oldest continuous forum in the country. We are celebrating our 100th anniversary, and we invite you to join us as we continue throughout the year with a variety of events. Visit our website, www.cityclub.org/100. As I said, we have a long and distinguished history of presenting political debates, and we provide an opportunity for the audience here and throughout Ohio to compare and contrast the candidates running for public office. Each week throughout the year, the City Club presents a wide variety of interesting programs with informed speakers addressing the significant issues of the day. We'd be pleased to welcome you as a supporter of the City Club and our ongoing mission of civic dialogue. Both individual and corporate membership plans are available. And we will now have an opportunity for the traditional City Club questions from the audience. Questions addressed to all candidates will have a 1-minute response. I think actually let's shorten it to 30 seconds so we can get a couple of audience questions in. And if the question is addressed to a specific candidate, he or she can answer. And if it's a general question, again, I'll come in and tell you the order I want you to respond to. And then to the audience, please make your questions, stating them as briefly and clearly as possible. Holding the microphone today is City Club Special Initiatives Coordinator Phil Williams. First question, please.
Thank you. This is to all the candidates. Question with regards to monetary policy. How would you handle the monetary situation of our country, the value of the dollar, and, of course, the Federal Reserve?
Thank you. And let's, again, where we start at the end of the table with Mr. Bliss and just come right up the table this direction.
Say goodbye to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is another one of those, and even though the Fed is a shortened version of it, it's another one of those acronyms that we're under attack by. We need to stop printing the money. We need to revalue the dollar. We need to stop spending it as ludicrously as we are on ourselves and inflating it beyond belief. But the Federal Reserve, we need to put the monetary policies back into Congress's hands where it belongs and not a group of private individuals where they can dictate how much our dollar's worth.
Thank you, Mr. Bliss. Mr. Dodt.
If the Federal Reserve, if they do away with it, I think they should fold it into the Treasury Department so they have control over it. I'm concerned about the corruption possibilities. They raise the rates, and this bunch of guys get together, we're going to raise the rates and tell our friends we're going to raise the rates on Thursday, and then they buy or sell stocks, and then the rates go up and the market falls, and all of a sudden, now we're going to lower the rates. Oh, okay, let's lower the rates, and the rest goes up, and then all their buddies make millions of dollars. That, to me, you cannot have that outside the government doing that. That has to be literally under the control of the Treasury Department, and the Congress is absolutely necessary to have oversight and control of what's going on here. We've got to stop printing money. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr.
You're going to have
Dodt.
hyperinflation.
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Glisman.
Okay, wasteful spending. We're doing outsourcing. We're giving ourselves raises, and yet we keep forgetting about the little guy. Maybe the Federal Reserve needs to be stopped. But if we stop spending, even if it's just $1 a day, put that in a different pot, shall we say, perhaps that could strengthen our nation and balance the budget. There's a lot of things we could throw out from foreign aid, and some of our welfare cases need to be scrutinized. And good.
Thank you, Ms. Glisman.
The hook.
Thank you. Mr. Gregory.
I think we go back to the Constitution. Article 2, Section 5 through 9 specifically gives to the Congress of the United States the control of our economy, For some reason, we subcontracted this to a private corporation registered in Delaware in 1913. And our trade policies. If China wants to put a 30% tariff on goods coming from the United States to China, we put a 30% tariff on Chinese goods coming into the United States. If you want to do 9 and 9, we do the 9 and 9. But no longer should we go along with this unfair trade practice.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory. Dr. Pryce.
Well, I'm not so much troubled by the Federal Reserve in its own right, other than the fact that the government bestowed on them the right of punitive and regulatory power without answer at the ballot box or in the courtroom. And as far as I'm concerned, that's the way you control the Federal Reserve. You make them an advisory committee instead of a regulatory and punitive power. That will get control over the dollar so that the citizens of the United States have that control back in their hands. It belongs with the Congress where the Constitution says it is.
Thank you, Dr. Pryce. And Phil, another audience question?
Yeah, Bob Murphy, I host American News and Views, and being a conservative Republican, I'd like to ask this question. What's your views on right to life?
And thank you. We'll go, again, the opposite direction, started with Dr. Pryce.
Well,
and
as a
30
physician,
seconds each, I think,
sorry.
Carrie. Yeah.
As a physician, I can tell you that when we're trained in medical school, that when you see a pregnant patient, you're taught that you have two patients. And it begins right from the beginning, as far as I'm concerned. And you can't say it any simpler than that.
Thank you, Dr. Bliss. Mr. Gregory.
Hi. Thank you. I, too, have a medical training background. I was part of that effort to bring intact survival of critically ill, newborn, preterm babies from 27 weeks to 24. I've always fought for life, and I will continue to fight for life.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory. Ms. Glisman.
Of course, I'm for pro-life. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had 3 kids and watched my kids have their kids. I'm also pro-life on animals. I don't feel right when people put a bunch of kitties in a bag and throw it in the lake. From the minute you conceive, and my son was a surprise. I was still on the pill. But I love every minute that I've enjoyed with him. Pro-life is what should be the responsibility of every human. If you don't want that child, then you shouldn't have played around.
Thank you, Ms. Glisman. Mr. Dodt.
I believe life begins at conception. I will not support abortion, but I know that my will may not prevail just because of society. But if I can vote to discontinue or reduce this disgraceful practice, I will do so. I believe killing the unborn is always will be a blight on the national character.
Thank you, Mr. Dodt. And Mr. Bliss.
From conception to natural death, all human life needs to be protected. And unfortunately, I lost a daughter, so I know what the loss feels like. Now, it wasn't due to abortion, but you know what the loss is, and I've spoken with several women that have gone through it, and the loss feeling is still the same. Now, this comes back to individual responsibility. And like Ms. Glisman said, you know what you're getting involved in. There's always people that will adopt the children. But as far as the topic itself, from conception until natural death, all life needs to be protected.
Thank you, Mr. Bliss, and thank you, audience, for those questions. And now I will have a closing question. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer this closing question, as well as to make a final statement. And the order for the closing was again determined by a drawing before the start of the program. And the order will be that Mr. Dodt will go first, and then Mr. Bliss, Dr. Pryce, Ms. Glisman, and Mr. Gregory, and I'll keep you all on track. The closing question is this. With faith in Congress at all-time lows, name one proposal from President Obama that you would be willing to support, if elected, in order to foster collaboration. And again, Mr. Dodt, you're going to go first. One proposal that is from President Obama that you could support.
I don't know of any. He wants to gut the national security. He wants to impoverish the entire country and do absolutely nothing about the oil situation where we're selling our oil overseas, rather than let you and me enjoy reductions in the price at the pump. So I don't see there's anything that this man has or could offer that I could support. There's nothing there. He's just a neo-Marxist jackboot, armband-wearing, goose-stepping Quisling as far as I'm concerned. Now, for my final statement, is that going to be the final statement? I want to give you an idea of exactly what you're going to get into if you don't vote in this election and take really a strong stand. One, I'm going to have to become Obama. So use your imagination. You're not allowed to. Who told you you could earn more than $250,000? I have not given you that permission. You will have the house I tell you can buy. You will have the car I tell you can own. You will eat the food I tell you can eat. Your kids will go to school and they will learn what I tell them to learn, nothing more. Don't you even bring up the Constitution. You're too stupid to know what the Constitution says. I'll tell you what the Constitution says when I get darn good and ready. Now, on the other hand, if you give the Democratic National Committee or my reelection committee a generous contribution, I'll give you a waiver.
Thank you, Mr. Dodt.
You're welcome.
And I think now Mr. Bliss. You go.
I think the only thing he's close on getting anything that I could agree with is domestic oil. And I say that close because he's just rehashing stuff that's already been done as far as exploring the continental shelf. We know where the oil is. And we got a good deal of it here in Ohio, too. It's 2,000 feet below your feet. And we need to drill for it and do it the right way. So if he were to come through with that, I could agree with him on that. This primary process we're going through right now is to find the most viable candidate to take on Sherrod Brown. In 2006, I worked real close with the Mike DeWine campaign and had a chance to see this guy up close, Sherrod Brown, that is. Fluffy speeches and fancy talk aren't going to beat this guy. You've got to come at Sherrod Brown with a junkyard dog type of attitude. And I'm not preaching violence. I'm just saying the attitude you go into it with is going to be one that you don't take anything from him, because you can try to play the high road and be the nice guy like Senator DeWine did, and you're going to get undercut because the left isn't going to be nice to you. You know, they're going to be smile to your face, and then they're going to stab you in the back. He's the consummate career politician, unlike our friend who isn't here today, who I believe all of us are insulted by the fact that he thinks he can sit at home and win this primary by proxy, and that's not a hero as he touts himself to be. That's a coward in my book, regardless of what your resume says. But we need to get out there and fight for our sovereignty. That's going to be a big issue in the next coming year. March 6th, folks, is not Super Tuesday. It's Write-In Tuesday. And Bliss is a lot easier to spell than Murkowski was out in Alaska, and she won the election. So I hope you'll remember to write me in on March 6th. And thanks to you for having us here, and God bless America.
Thank you, Mr. Bliss. Dr. Pryce.
Well, clearly, the one thing that I agreed with Mr. Obama was his decision to go after Osama bin Laden. As far as I'm not in favor of going out to kill people, but this is a man that needed to be taken out. And although I think that he did very much like Josh Mandel does, is grab the highlights from things that other people have done, he did make the decision to go with it, and I'm glad he did. This election we've heard this for decades, that this is probably the most important election that we've ever faced in our lives. And it is. We have a bad health care law in place. We've got an economy that's reeling. And the president says it's getting better. Well, it's not a matter of what it is. It's what it should be. And if we get the government off the backs of our companies and allow the dollar to run in the free market, things will get better for us. So at this point in history, you have to look at all the candidates and decide who's got the widest range of experience, and particularly take a look at the fact that I'm probably the oldest candidate here, and there comes some wisdom with age and experience. This is a time when we don't need to just worry about party politics. The party has taken over, and the health of the party is more important than the health of the country. I'd like to see that reversed. And when you get to the ballot and you see all those names and you can't really remember them, just remember the Price is Right, and that'll get you where you want to go.
Thank you, Dr. Pryce. Ms. Glisman.
I didn't vote Democratic. I never have, never will, and I didn't vote for Barack. And there's nothing he could do that would impress me, except leave office next year. The goal is to beat Brown in November. He has a strong support amongst retirees, independents, and women voters. So in choosing your nominee this March, you must vote for the candidate who can best capture those demographics if they are to be victorious in November. Remember, this is a very crucial election coming up for the Republicans to once more gain control of the Senate. The media has already declared Mandel the winner, and that's not the case because lobbyist money does not equal votes. Mandel has consistently been behind Mr. Brown. He is not electable, and he is not relatable because he has been married 4 years. No children. I have children. Many of you out there have them. You know what it's like to worry whether or not you've got enough food to put on their tables, shelter over their heads, and maybe clothing on their backs. I stand proud because I am an American. I believe in the Constitution. I am on a fixed income, and I'm older than him, by the way. I am a proud American, proud of the Constitution. I am a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution, and probably on the flip side, the Confederacy. I believe in the flag, the pledge. It should be said every day in school, and God should never come off our money and off of our pledge.
Thank you, Ms.
Bless
Glisman.
everybody here today and America.
Thank you, Ms. Glisman. Mr. Gregory.
Okay, thank you very much. This is one of the most important elections that we're about to face. But in answer to your question, pulling out of Iraq and on time. We lost too many people. We have too many casualties from that war. And we were unprepared to take care of those casualties once they came home. We have a society where we have homeless female veterans from the Iraq and Afghan war. This is not the America that they went abroad to serve. I believe I am the best candidate to serve this great state in the United States Senate. I understand the role of the United States Senate. It's a check on executive power. That power has not been exercised. The White House is legislating where the Senate should be legislating. The White House is getting us into all sorts of arrangements in foreign affairs where the Senate should be ratifying those agreements. The President is declaring war where the Senate is supposed to declare war. And I tell you, I will represent you. I will maintain allegiance to the Constitution of the United States, and I will come back before you before every major vote in the United States Senate to see what is the will of the people of this great state of Ohio. God bless this community. God bless the United States of America.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our debate. We want to thank the candidates again. We want to thank our panel that asked the questions, and thank our broadcast partner, IdeaStream. This forum is now adjourned.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.